evening, the Honorable Joseph E. Joseph presiding. Please be seated.
The record will reflect the presence of counsel for the parties. The defendant is present, the attorney is present. You understand that you're still under oath?
Yes.
Thank you. You may continue with your examination.
Thank you. Now, I think one thing you testified to before the break, when I had asked you the amount of force which would have been necessary to cause the fractures that you observed both to the front of the jawbone and to the ramus or the rear of the right jawbone. What term did you use?
Is the question what amount of force?
Yeah, are you able to answer that question?
I mean, I would consider it a reasonable amount of force. I can't tell you a pounds per square inch number, but to break the jawbone takes a reasonable amount of force. Yes.
And what about the jawbone requires a reasonable amount of force?
Well, it's one thing that affects how easy it is to fracture a bone is how thin the bone is. So ribs fracture relatively easily, fingers fracture relatively easily. Things like the femur take a lot more force because the femur is very thick, and the jaw is kind of in between thickness. So it's
femur is the thigh.
Yes, excuse me. Femur is the thigh bone, the upper thigh bone. So the jawbone thickness is kind of an in between thickness. So it's it would require a fair amount of force to fracture a bone of that thickness.
And Dr. Haro, you've already described for us the wounds that you observed on the right portion of the jawbone that you identified as being Charlie Scott's. Can you tell us how, let's start with the scrape pattern you described earlier. Can you tell us how that wound was inflicted? I'm sorry, was inflicted.
There's a couple of ways that would be the most likely way that injury would have been inflicted. One would be someone attacking her with a sharp object on the face, and in that process scraping across the bone. Another possible way that injury may have occurred is if someone is using a small serrated knife to try and remove the soft tissue from the bone and essentially defleshing the bone.
When you say remove the soft tissue from the bone, can you use layperson's terms for that?
So that would be like removing the muscle and the skin from the bone. So when we talk about the body, there's the bones, and then everything else is the soft tissue. So that includes the skin, the fat under your skin, the muscles, and those all kind of lumped in as soft tissue. So what I'm talking about is using a knife to try and take all of those tissues off of the bone.
And the other word you used was defleshing manner, is that what you said?
Yes, and defleshing I'm just using to mean removing the flesh or the soft tissue, the muscle and the skin from the bone.
And then with respect to the other wound patterns you described, I guess the incision wounds was the term you used. Mm-hmm. How would that have been inflicted?
The incised wounds, again, were caused by a sharp object, like a knife or some other similarly sharp object. And similarly, there's a couple of ways that it most likely would have happened. One would be someone attacking her with a knife or other sharp object, hitting her on the jaw and on the face. Another possibility is that those could have also occurred when someone was trying to deflesh or remove the muscle and the skin from the jaw. It's possible.
And Dr. Harl, in looking at the injuries of the wounds to the right side of the jawbone, are you able to tell us when that would have occurred?
No, I'm not.
And why is that?
When injuries are, I can age injuries and tell you, generally when they occurred when they're in skin or muscle or in an internal organ, because in that case there'll be hemorrhage or bleeding and there may be inflammation, and there are signs that I can see at autopsy and under the microscope that tell me how old an injury is and about when it occurred. But in bone, there's none of that blood vessels or inflammation going on. It's just the bone, and all of the soft tissue is gone, so I'm not able to date when the injury occurred.
Besides doing an inspection of the two pieces of jawbone that we were just discussing, did you have an opportunity to inspect any clothing item that purportedly belonged to Charlie Scott?
Yes, Tony Earls had a black bra that he asked me to look at that was recovered from the scene and was thought to be that of Charlie Scott.
Okay, and did you have a chance to make observations of the black bra?
Yes, I did.
And where was that done?
That was done at the Maui County Forensic Facility here in Wailuku.
And the morgue and the facility, are they under the same building? Or
Yes,
within
yes.
the same building?
Same building.
I'm going to check, Your Honor, this time the state would ask permission to publish this exhibit on 97 and 99. And I'll have more after that, but for now, 97 and 99.
Permission granted.
Hey, Dr. Hall, do you recommend the show in State Exhibit 97?
Yes, this is the black bra that I was asked by Tony Earls to examine.
Okay, and then looking, what observations, if any, did you make with respect to the black bra?
Can I come look at the bigger screen?
Sure.
Is it-
Dr. Hall stepped down.
Yes.
So on the bra, you can see that the...
I'm sorry, the pointer's behind you.
Oh,
if you need to.
I'm
I'm sorry, Your Honor. May we approach? I'm looking at this.
All right. Give me a minute.
Thank you, Honor. Dr. I think my question to you is, and I think you asked us for this, can you tell us what, if anything, did you note about the black bra when you went into the morgue area to inspect it?
So I noticed that it's got some defects to it, including the strap being torn, and there's a tear over the left cup of the bra going into the foam. There's another tear on the right side of the strap. There's a small tear at approximately the midpoint between the two cups. That's all that I see
Okay,
in this photo. Yeah.
All right, you're using the word tear. What do you mean by that?
So these are defects in the fabric where the fabric has been either cut or torn that shouldn't normally be present in the fabric.
Now, in your occupation as a forensic pathologist, are you able or have been trained and educated on trying to make a determination on whether I guess clothing item has been torn versus cut by a sharp object?
Yes, as part of the death investigation, I always examine the clothing, and we are trained to examine the clothing and to ensure that the injuries on the body are consistent with what we see on the clothing, or vice versa, and what injuries on the body and also defects in the clothing that might give some evidence as to how the death occurred. So I am trained in that.
Okay, and in this case, because you had no body with the exception of the two pieces of jawbone and that piece of bone you described earlier, you didn't have anything to compare the clothing item with, is that right?
Correct. So in this case, I'm examining the bra on its own.
Did you notice or see any, I guess, defects within the bra that would be consistent with a sharp object?
Yes, there were, and I don't see them well in this photo, but there were defects in the fabric that appeared more consistent with something sharp, like a blade or scissors, rather than a tear.
Okay. Let me show you Stacy's Exhibit 99, which is in evidence. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Okay. Can you describe what we're looking at here?
Yes, this is the cup of the bra, and this is along the side of the cup of the bra. There's a defect that's somewhat elliptical in shape, and this defect appears most consistent, in my opinion, to being caused by something sharp. And that's partly because the foam is relatively thick. There's no strands of fabric stretching across it like it was pulled. So I think this is most likely caused by a sharp object.
And showing you Stacy's Exhibit 100. Is that the same photograph?
It's a different photograph. I can't tell if this is the same lesion in the bra just turned to a different angle, or if this is a different one.
Okay. Can you put it aside? Yeah, I'm going to put Stacy's Exhibit 100 side by side with Stacy's Exhibit 99. And you can let me know whether that... That's the same company.
So it looks to me like this is a photo of the same defect taken from the interior surface of the bra.
All right. Your permission to, at this time, publish Stacy's Exhibit 102, which is already in evidence.
Permission granted.
Thank you. I'm showing you what has been admitted into evidence as Stacy's Exhibit 102. Can you tell us what we're looking at here?
Yes, this is again the black bra, and it shows also in the cup portion of the bra a defect that goes through the fabric and through the foam completely to the other side. And similarly, this defect is, in my opinion, consistent with being caused by a sharp object for the same reasons, because there's no strands of fabric connecting across as you would expect from a tear, and because it does go all the way through the foam, which is a relatively thick fabric.
Now, with respect to the, I guess the right side of the photograph, where I guess the strap is connected to the cup, of the black
It's right
bra. Right, and you're indicating to it right now. What type of defect, if any, do you see there?
It appears to be it's kind of difficult for me to examine or to comment on from the angle in this photograph. It does appear to be a defect because it looks like this full thickness is the band that should connect the two cups, and there's a defect here. I can't determine based on this photo if it's necessarily from a sharp object or something else.
And showing you what is in evidence is State's Exhibit 98. Do you have permission to publish that?
Permission granted.
Thank you. Okay, again, this, what are you looking at here, Dr. Hart?
This is the strap of the black bra. So on the right side, you can see the edge of the cup, and then this is the strap
On the other side.
on the middle and the
On
left
the
side.
left,
Yeah.
okay. And looking at this photograph, are you able to tell us what the defects in the middle left of the bra are consistent with?
Yes, there's multiple defects sort of clustered in the midpoint of the photo, and these again are most consistent with being caused by a sharp object for the same reason as described before. They're relatively clean edges on the fabric, other than where the lace is located along the inferior portion, but there's no strands of fabric going all the way across, and these appear most consistent with being caused by a sharp object.
And showing you State's Exhibit, you have permission to publish State's Exhibit 105, which is in evidence.
Permission granted.
And then looking at State's Exhibit 105, which vantage point are we looking at the black bra in this photograph?
So this is looking at the middle of the black bra, the strap that connects the two cups, and it's looking from the back side.
And Doctor, turning your attention to the left side of the photograph, and the inside of the cup on the left side, did you note any defects in that area?
I see here a defect in the cup where the fabric is torn and the underlying foam is torn, and there's a similar defect on the superior edge or the upper edge of the cup, where again the fabric and the underlying foam is torn.
And beginning with the upper cut, the last one, the lateral you just referred to, and again, this is the left side of the photograph, and the torn area that's higher up. Right. Were you able to determine what is that consistent with respect to what would have caused that?
This upper one is consistent with a sharp object, again, because it is relatively clean edges to the foam and the fabric, and so it appears most consistent with being caused by a sharp object.
And then the lower defect, again, on the left side of the photograph.
The lower defect in the left cup is a little bit more unclear. I can't really say, partly because of shadowing under the fabric, so I can't see the foam that well. So I can't say definitively what I think caused that defect in the fabric.
And you have permission to publish State's Exhibit 106.
Permission granted.
Thank you. Dr. Howard, looking at State's Exhibit 106, and more specifically, is there a defect in the right side of the photograph that you note?
Yes, on the right side of the photograph, which is the left cup of the bra, there's a defect about the middle of the cup, where there's a cut in the fabric and a cut into the underlying foam. And this similarly appears most likely to have been caused by a sharp object.
And I'm sorry, with the pointer you're indicating to the large cut that's in the middle of the left cup of the black bra.
Correct, it was on the right side of the photo.
Thank Thank you. Please have a seat, Dr. Dr. Howell, did you also have an opportunity to inspect, I guess, fingernails that would have been recovered, purportedly belonging to Charlie Scott?
Yes, Tony Earls did show me some fingernails that were recovered from the scene. Yes.
And Your Honor, this time the state would be asking permission to publish State's Exhibits 91 through 96. Well, I'm sorry, I'm not sure if they've been admitted to evidence.
No, I'd like to read the same objection relative to this topic as I did on the bench.
And the state will offer the same response to that objection, Your Honor.
All right, well, as to that particular objection that was raised here at the bench, I'll overrule the objection.
Thank you. And, Your Honor, just for the record, I'm showing counsel what has been marked for identification as State's Exhibits 91 through 96. May I approach, Your Honor, with these
You may do
exhibits?
so.
Thank you. Dr. Hall, I'm going to show you what has been marked as State's Exhibits 91 through 96 for identification. If you can just take a look at that, please. Thank you. I'm sorry. Are you finished looking at those?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recognize those photographs in those exhibits?
Yes, these are the fingernails that were shown to me by Tony Earls in February of 2012.
And do they accurately depict the fingernails that you observed when you, I guess, went to the morgue and photographs provided them to you?
Yes.
Have they been changed or altered in any way, the photographs?
Not that I can detect.
You know, at this time the state would move into evidence these exhibits. 91 to 96, marked for identification. 91 through 96.
Mr. Upwell.
Subject to my objection relative to the topic, I would have no objection.
All right, at the last bench conference.
Yes.
Court at this time will receive in evidence State's Exhibits 91 through 96 marked for identification purposes. And permission to publish grounds.
Thank you. And Dr. Howell, well, first of all, may I retrieve the exhibits, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. So, Dr. Howell, please sit down. We'll approach my Hey, Dr. Carl, first looking at State's Exhibit 91, you already testified that you recognize these as the nails that Tony Earls provided for you when you were doing your inspection, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And looking at State's Exhibit 91, are you able to tell us what we're looking at here?
This is a human fingernail with some dirt and some other debris attached. Some of that debris may be attached skin that is decomposing, although I can't tell for sure in this photograph.
Okay, and showing you State's Exhibit 92. Again, there's an A next to it.
This again is a human fingernail.
And is it attached to anything at the base of the fingernail?
There is a little bit of attached soft tissue, so this would be like the cuticle and the skin just at the base of the nail that still appears to be attached.
And looking at this nail in the photograph, Exhibit 92, are you able to tell how the nail got separated from the finger?
No, I'm not.
And State's Exhibit 93. What are you seeing here, Dr. Hart?
This again is a human fingernail with some overlying debris that I can't tell if it's dirt versus some fragments of decomposing skin that might be attached to it.
Okay. State's Exhibit 94.
This is again a human fingernail, and at the base there is a little bit of attached soft tissue, which would be the cuticle or the skin right at the base of the nail.
And State's Exhibit 95.
This is a human fingernail, again with some attached soft tissue in the cuticle area. There's also some what appears to be mud or possibly other debris attached to the nail and sitting next to it.
And the last photograph, State's Exhibit 96.
This is a human fingernail.
Okay. And at the cuticle part or the base of the fingernail, did you notice anything there?
It does look like there's a small amount of attached possible cuticle or skin on this nail.
Now, Dr. Hall, in looking at the nails shown in Exhibits 91 through 96, are there any signs that the fingernails were removed with a sharp object?
I did not see, and I do not see in these photos, any obvious injuries or anything to tell me how they were removed.
Are you familiar with whether, or first of all, based on your training and experience in education, are you familiar with, I guess, for lack of a better term, the dynamics of a human body that is in a decomposed state?
Yes.
And what do you mean when I say in a decomposed state?
So after death, as soon as death occurs, the human body or animal, any living being's body will start to decompose. This is due to lack of oxygen, lack of blood flow. Bacteria in the environment play a role in it, and bacteria that are in the body play a role in it because they begin to proliferate. So over time, the skin and the internal organs and the muscles, all of the what we call soft tissues, start to break down. They start to lose their normal structure and to decompose, and eventually they will, over the course of many months to years, they may completely decompose into into essentially soil, and they will be you won't be able to differentiate them from the soil.
Okay, and then I'm sure it's sister. Please have a seat. In a decomposed state, is it possible for a person's fingertips or fingernails to just come off of a person's hand?
Yes, one of the, there are specific things that happen to the body in decomposition, and one of them is we call it skin slippage, and that's when the skin, the top layer of the skin can actually slip off. And because the nail is attached to that layer of the skin, sometimes the nail will come off with the skin, and that can be part of the decomposition process.
Have you experienced that in your profession?
Yes, sometimes when we are examining decomposed bodies in the morgue, and it usually happens when we're looking at the hands and trying to take fingerprints, the skin of the fingers will sometimes just slip off, and sometimes they'll take the nail with it.
Now, as a forensic pathologist, Dr. Harl, as part of your, I guess, duties and responsibilities, do you try to determine a cause of death as well as a manner of death?
Yes, in all of the deaths the forensic deaths that I investigate, one of the major roles is determining a cause of death and a manner of death.
And then the term cause of death, that may sound self-explanatory, but can you just tell us what does that mean?
Sure. The cause of death is the event or disease or whatever factor that ultimately led to this person's death. So it may be a heart attack, it may be a gunshot wound to the head, it may be anything like that. The event that started the chain of events that led to someone dying. So.
And in this particular case involving Charlie Scott, were you able to determine the cause of death?
I was not able to determine a specific cause of death.
And can you tell us or explain why not?
Well, the only part of Charlie's body that we had was her jaw, and there's no way from the jaw to tell the mechanism by which she died.
And the other portion or the other prong you mentioned was the manner of death. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell us what does it mean when you use the term manner of death?
So manner of death is a way to classify how a death occurred. And so what it's basically trying to quantify is how the event, how the manner, or how the cause of death came to be. So by law, there are 5 choices. There's a natural, accident, suicide, homicide, or undetermined.
Okay. And let's go through that. When you say there's 5 choices, let's start first with what you mentioned first. You said natural.
Yes.
And what is a natural manner of death mean?
So a natural death is one that occurred due to natural biological processes. It was not due to the influence of any outside unnatural factor like drugs or another human being. So that would include the majority of deaths, and things like heart attacks, cancer, infections would all represent natural deaths.
And then the next choice or option you mentioned was accidental.
So an accidental death is a death due to an outside force that was not intended to cause harm. So this is someone dying due to a fall or due to a traffic accident. Includes things like drowning. It's where there's an outside force outside of that person's body, outside of that person's natural health that occurred, and it did not occur with any other person having the intent to harm them.
And what, if anything, does that have to do with a death caused by an animal?
So a death caused by an animal would be considered an accident.
And the other option you said was homicide, is that correct?
Yes.
And what is homicide?
A homicide is a death that occurred due to the intentional actions of another human being. So when we use the term homicide medically and on the death certificate, it's not necessarily implying guilt. It's just saying that someone died due to another human being's intentional actions. Whether that person is, legally liable is a legal matter for the courts, but the term homicide, as we use it on the death certificate, just means that someone died due to the intentional acts of another human being.
And I think you gave us one example earlier. You said somebody getting shot in the head.
Yes, if someone's shot by another person and the other person pulled the trigger intentionally, that would be a homicide.
And then I think the last option you said was undetermined.
There's two more options: undetermined and suicide.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to suicide.
Okay. So suicide is a death caused by the intentional act of oneself to harm oneself. So it's a death that occurs when someone consciously and knowingly takes an action to harm themselves. So this would be a hanging, a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head, and an overdose with the intent to kill yourself or to harm yourself.
And then the last one is undetermined.
So undetermined is one that we use when we cannot, to a reasonable degree of certainty, determine that the death falls into any of the other four categories.
Now, as a forensic pathologist, Dr. Morrow, were you able to classify the manner of death for Charlie Scott in this case?
Yes.
And what was the classification?
Her death was classified as a homicide.
And can you just tell us what provided you with, I guess, the information that caused you or allowed you to reach that classification of homicide?
So the manner of death is determined by the entire death investigation. For example, if you have someone that overdosed on medications, whether it's an accident versus a suicide, depends on the investigation. Depends on if they left a suicide note, if they told someone they were going to kill themselves. So when I determine the manner of death, I take into account my examination of the body and all of the investigative information. And in Charlie's case, what we have is an otherwise healthy young adult woman with no known serious illness who suddenly disappears. And then she is subsequently, the only part of her body that is found is her jaw. It has suspicious sharp force injuries. So based on all of those factors, her death is most likely a homicide.
You have no further questions?
Cross-examination, Mr. Report.
Just a few questions. And one relative to that note, or your last piece of testimony. I take it that when doing an autopsy, one of the main objectives in doing so is to come up with a conclusion relative to this manner of death and or cause of death. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct.
And I guess, did you do an autopsy report in this matter?
Yes, I did. And it was a report essentially just of my examination of the jawbone.
Okay, and I guess where in your autopsy report did you have that ultimate conclusion that the manner of death was a homicide?
So in her report, I don't list the cause and manner of death, and that was an omission on my part. In her case, this was an ongoing police investigation for several weeks after the initial discovery of the jawbone, and I initially signed out the case so that we would have a written record of what I saw on the jawbone, so that we could provide that to other investigative agencies. And I signed that out before I came to a conclusion as to the cause and manner of death.
I guess what additional supplemental information did you get after the drafting of your report to come to that conclusion?
So the primary additional information included a report from a forensic anthropology consultant who examined the jawbone and rendered her opinion as to the cause of the injuries.
Can I ask you about that? When did you review that report?
I reviewed that report after we received it back from her, and that I don't recall the actual date. That would have been, a month or so after we sent it to her. So.
And you'd agree with me that in your autopsy report, you actually made a note that you would, I guess, supplement that report with any additional information that you review, and I imagine it would have included the conclusions that you rendered as well, right?
That's true, and you're right. I should have gone back and submitted an addendum as I said I would, and I did not.
So would it be your testimony that in terms of your pre-trial analysis of the evidence in this matter, well, strike that. Let me move on. In terms of the language used by forensic pathologists, are there terms used to describe whether injuries occurred before death or on or around the time of death or after death?
Yes, so the terms we use are ante-mortem, meaning it occurred before death, peri-mortem, meaning it occurred around the time of death, and post-mortem, meaning it occurred after death.
Now, relative to the, I guess, the defects that you noted and testified about today, and the injuries associated with that, were you able to formulate any opinions relative to injuries being fitting into one of those categories?
Based on the injuries to the jawbone, I was not able to determine if they were ante, peri, or post-mortem, so I was not able to draw a conclusion as to if they occurred before, during, or after her death.
And so would it be accurate to say, if you don't know that, you also have no evidence whatsoever linking Steven Capobianco with the injuries that you testified to?
That is true. You know, part of my investigation does not involve investigating any specific suspect. So you're correct. I have no evidence from my investigation linking anyone specifically to her death.
And relative to your testimony about animal attacks, you testified rather specifically in terms of your analysis relative to, for example, canines. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Now, have you done any particular investigation or research relative to what type of injuries or defects can be expected from, let's start with a boar attack?
I have read some literature published on studies about boar attacks on, some of these were animal studies, so where they place like a goat out and have a boar attack it, and they document what type of injuries are seen. So I have read that literature.
Okay, what about attacks of wild boars on humans?
I have, other than the article that was provided to me shortly during the break, I have not read any other detailed literature on the subject, and that's in part because it's impossible to perform a scientific study on humans being attacked. You can't put 20 humans out and let boars attack them and then document what's happened.
Okay, you were provided with a journal article from the Journal of Clinical Forensic Medicine during the break. Is that accurate?
That's true.
And is that what you refer to in terms of having read regarding, well, having read during the break?
Yes, I read it briefly. Unfortunately, I didn't have much time to look over it, but I did scan it briefly.
Now, aside from what's in that article, based on your training and experience relative to the hallmarks of boar, let's say, attack, would you agree with me that it differs from that the indications of a canine attack?
Yes.
And how would that difference present itself?
One of the differences is the difference in shape and size of their teeth. So if you do have injuries on the body, they would look different because their teeth are different shape and sizes. Additionally, canines can have claws, so you might see claw marks if there's a canine involved, and boars don't have claws.
Okay. Wouldn't it be accurate that in terms of boar attacks, the hallmark of that would be fatal penetrating injuries in contrast to, for example, bite marks of a canine?
Yes, in deaths due to a boar attack, because they're the primary injury you're going to see is related to their large tusks. So you would tend to see large gaping defects from their tusks, which you term penetrating injury, which is accurate, rather than a bite mark from a canine. You would see multiple teeth.
And these tusks can vary in size on different boars, right?
Yes.
And they can go so far as to resemble knives protruding from the boar's jaws, correct?
You know, I know boars' tusks are referred to as being sharp, and I know that they are sharp. I'm not going to say that I'm a boar tusk expert, but in my opinion, they would not be as sharp as a knife that I am aware of.
Well, let me ask you that. You talked about looking and making reference to a human skeleton when doing analysis in your office or wherever you do your analysis. Did you avail yourself to any models, for example, of any boar jaws and tusks to do your analysis?
The only thing I had for boars were photos of boars, so I didn't have a physical boar jaw present, but I did have photos of boars and photos of boars' tusks that I could look at.
So would it be fair to say that you conducted no, for example, scientific experiment to see whether a boar tusk could create injuries, for example, like those on the brow?
Judge, objection, this assumes that, assumes a responsibility or something that.
So this is the speaking objection. What rule of evidence is that?
I'm going to overrule the objection. You may answer.
Can you repeat the question?
So is it fair to say that you conducted no, for example, scientific experiment with any boar model or model of any boar tusk or teeth in the performance of your examination?
That is correct.
Can we agree that based on your training and experience that wild boar are carnivorous? Or, well,
Yes.
and that includes rotting meat, for example?
Yes.
And not only includes rotting meat, but they prefer and are drawn to rotting meat. Would that be accurate?
Judge, objection, there's no foundation for this.
The objection is sustained.
Well, I take it that you have studied, for example, what kind of natural things might impact, for example, a decomposing body in your analysis as a forensic pathologist, right?
Yes. And what I have, what I specifically have focused on is, specific to this case, is what type of injuries you would expect.
But, bottom line, you know that wild boar eat decomposing bodies, right?
Yes.
And in that regard, they tend to eat almost anything of that except the bones, right?
Yeah, I suppose that is true, yes.
Now, you testified relative to a defect in the jawbone in terms of a fracture. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And your testimony was that it takes a reasonable amount of force to create such a fracture because of the density and size of that bone, right?
That's correct.
Now, you'd agree with me that it is a common injury, even, for example, for boxers, to injure their finger bones before a jawbone gets broken when the two make impact.
Judge, objection, no foundation for this.
The objection is sustained.
Do you have the training and experience to answer that question?
Yes.
What training and experience do you have to answer that question?
I am trained to interpret injuries, how they occurred. This includes bony fractures, and how they are likely to have occurred. And based on the scenario you gave, I think that's the type of question you're going to ask.
Okay, now would you agree with me that even, for example, in trained boxers, that the size and density of the finger bones are going to give way and fracture before the size and density of the jawbone fractures?
In some cases, yes.
Now, in your observations of the bra that you testified about, well, let me ask you this. Relative to your opinions on what you first described as the tears in the bra, did you make that analysis on the fly here, or did you analyze and come to your opinions at a prior time?
No, I analyzed that bra with Tony Earls shortly after it was discovered back in February of 2012, and specifically I was asked, what I thought of the defects in the fabric of that bra and how they occurred.
And did you, I guess, document those opinions in your analysis anywhere?
No, that was a verbal conversation between me and Tony.
Now, when you were looking at the bra back then, did you see a nice round hole in that bra?
I do not recall seeing a nice round, any
Should I do
round
object? This
defect.
big and big is what a nice round hole means.
The objection is sustained.
Well, you testified a lot about what you ultimately had an opinion as being, I guess, tears that were consistent with the knife, I guess, right?
In the bra.
Right.
So yeah, in the bra, the defects in the fabric, and I want to state that they are, somewhat non-specific. I think they are most consistent with being caused by a sharp object like a knife, but that is not a 100% conclusion because there's,
So even you have some doubt as to that conclusion then?
that's true.
Now, is it your testimony that when you observed that black bra with Tony Earls, well, let me ask you, did you do a thorough observation of that?
I wouldn't call it a detailed investigation, a detailed examination. He pulled it out for me. I was asked my opinion as to how those defects occurred. I did not myself, draw a diagram or measure them. So, I would not call it a detailed examination.
Well, I mean, if you're called to do a job, why wouldn't you do that job in a detailed fashion?
Judge, objection. That's how you meant it.
The objection is sustained. You may rephrase.
Let me ask you this. In your observation of that bra, did you at any point see a round hole in contrast to the holes or the tears that you testified to about in that bra?
Not that I recall.
Let me ask you this. In your experience as a forensic pathologist, have you had experience to observe bullet holes in fabric?
Yes.
What do those present as?
They are usually round, near perfectly round defects in the fabric.
And if you saw something like that, would you conduct any further testing to determine whether it was a bullet hole or not?
I personally would not. That is the police department's role. So if I saw that, I would make them aware and I would, aid them if necessary in doing that.
Relative to the fingernails that you testified about, you'd agree with me that probably the main reason why you cannot formulate any kind of opinion as to how or as to whether that was removed intentionally was because there are no tool marks present on any of those nails, correct?
I did not see any tool marks on the nails.
You'd agree with me that that would be something you'd be looking for to substantiate a theory, for example, of defleshing or taking off of those fingertips?
Yes, that's correct.
No further questions, thank you.
Recross-examination.
Thank you.
Redirect examination. My apologies.
Let's start with the fingernails. You testified earlier that you saw no tool marks, correct?
That's correct.
And with respect to the fingernails, would it be consistent if somebody, well, first of all, did you testify earlier that in your experience, based on a human body decomposing, skin from the fingertips would have just fallen off with respect, as well as with the nails with it?
That can occur, yes.
So would it be consistent if somebody is trying to remove a body after it is in a state of decomposition, when they're trying to remove the body, the fingernails can just fall off?
Yes, and I want to clarify, they're not going to fall off of their own accord. It does require a little bit of force from either even just hitting someone's arm or hitting the floor. It requires a little bit of tension to cause them to fall.
How about hitting branches or the ground?
Yes,
cause it to fall
yes,
off?
anything like that could cause it.
Also use the term, first of all, he used the term nice round holes and round holes. As you sit there, do you recall seeing any round holes?
In the bra.
That's correct.
I do not remember seeing any distinctly round holes in the bra, no.
And the article that you were provided with on the break about wild boar, is that distinguishable, or does that have any, is it germane to your testimony with respect to the discussion of the jawbone and whether or not there was any animal marks on that?
In my brief reading of the article, I did not find anything in there directly relevant to my examination of the jawbone in this case, and that's primarily because they did not, in that article, describe in detail injuries to bone. They described injuries to the body as a whole, location on the body. They described them as penetrating injuries, but they didn't describe what they look like on bone. And in this case, all I have is bone. So there was nothing in that article that I can directly correlate or compare to the current case.
Now, you mentioned to the defense lawyer that you did have a chance to, research some literature with respect to experimentation that would have, the person who authored that literature would have used goats in the field and have that been attacked by wild boar. Is that correct?
Yes, I did. When I was, trying to find information on what kind of injuries boar attacks create on bone, I did find a study where they had boars attack, and I don't remember if it was goat or something else, but in something a non-human mammal, and then they examined the body afterwards. And in that report, they had included some data on injuries to bone.
So in that instance, although it may be an animal bone, was that helpful for you in getting information through your research as to what type of markings you would expect a wild boar to leave on bone, whether it be human or animal?
Yes, because the article did have a couple of photographs, and it had some descriptions of the type of injury that is created in bone from boar tucks, so I did find that useful.
Okay, and please describe what type of injury.
I'm going to object. We don't. When it's hearsay, second, we don't have this on.
The key objection is over.
Thank you. So you can answer the question. Please describe the type of injury that you learned of when a boar attacks another animal. What type of markings or injury that you observe on the bone?
So what I found most useful from this article was the photographs. There was only a very brief description of the bone injuries, but the photographs show a relatively broad and somewhat shallow, almost V-shaped lesion in the bone, which was different from what I saw in the jawbone I examined in this case.
When you say broad, can you be a little more descriptive than that word if you can?
Yeah, it was wide. So as opposed to being very narrow and sharp, it was more of a broad or wide defect in the bone.
And what did it appear to you when you observed, the photographs of that bone? You said it's broad and wide. for example, you testified that the incision wounds that you saw on the jawbone that was identified as Charlie Scott's was narrow and long, consistent with a sharp object. When you look at the other photographs, you said it was V-shaped. Did it look like it was cut through the bone or scraped through? How would you describe it?
It was, again, it was wide and shallow, and it appeared, to my eye, appeared more like almost a chip in the bone rather than a sharp incision into the bone. And I know boar's teeth are sharp, but they are, to my knowledge, and to the photographs I've seen of boar's tusks, they're not as sharp as a very sharp knife.
Someone object, like a foundation.
She's describing what she's seen.
In a book, you can't tell the sharpness of teeth.
I'll sustain the objection. You made something with the
Book is right.
foundation. Well, let me hear the foundation first.
Thank you. As a forensic pathologist, do you rely on the research of other, scientific related professions in order to make determinations as to, for example, cause and manner of death?
Yes, widely so, as in terms of research that has been conducted or cases that have been published, textbooks. We rely on the scientific literature for information on various types of cases.
And what do you base your opinion on that although a boar's tusk may be sharp, it's not as sharp as a knife?
I'm basing that on the photos that I've seen of boars. So again, as I said before, I haven't ever held I haven't been face to face with a live boar, and I have never had a boar jaw in my hands, but I have seen photographs.
Okay. And then, with respect to the scraping pattern that you described for us,
So, my objection, Your Honor?
the state already ruled on that, so
I'm sorry?
the court's already ruled on that.
Well, there was a motion to strike. I'm going to deny the motion to strike in light of the foundation.
Thank you. Now, Dr. Howell, with respect to the scraping pattern that you testified to earlier on the jawbone, which was identified as Charlie Scott's, you said it's most consistent with a serrated edge, like a serrated knife. Is that correct?
That's correct.
To your knowledge and in your research, have you ever seen any photos or read any research that wild boars have, teeth that are like steak knives?
I've never read or have any reason to believe that wild boars have any teeth or other part of their body that have a serrated edge. No.
And you also mentioned on cross-examination by the defense lawyer that you, were going to or did assign this out to an outside agency. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Is that something that you do in your profession as a forensic pathologist?
Yes, and now just to clarify, death investigations in Maui County are they are run by the police. So that it's not me physically sending anything out. The police are in charge of the case and of the evidence. So if it gets sent out, it's by police. But I sometimes have suggestions on people that would be good consultants. In this case, I had worked with JPAC is what they used to be termed, and I know they have a different name now, but it was the Forensic Anthropology Unit with the U.S. military on Oahu, and I'd worked with them on cases before. The police had worked with them on cases before, so they were aware of them as well. And we both thought it would be a good idea to send the jawbones to JPAC to have a forensic anthropologist do an examination.
Okay, and I'm going to ask you some basic questions about that. Why did you think it would have been a good idea to send this case out for a forensic anthropologist?
So a forensic anthropologist is it's a different profession from what I do, and we have some overlap in this type of area. A forensic anthropologist is a specialist in bones. So I am a specialist in the human body and injuries to the human body, which does include bones, but forensic anthropologists are specifically trained in bones, injuries to bones, determining sex of bones, age of bones. So they actually have more experience than me in examining specifically bones, and that's why I thought it would be a good idea in this case.
And finally, today, when you saw the pictures of the jawbone, the bra, or the fingernails, has your opinion changed at all with respect to the manner and cause of death?
No.
Your Honor, I have no further questions. Thank you.
Brief cross-examination.
You recall testifying that you did an autopsy report, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I take it that by the time that you did that report, you had noticed, I guess, what you characterized as the scraping done by a serrated knife?
Done by possibly a serrated knife. I could not state that definitively, but it was suspicious for a serrated knife.
Okay, so even that, you have some doubt as yourself as to whether it was done by a serrated knife.
Your Honor, I object for the way that's phrased. That's argumentative.
What's hard?
The objection is overruled.
I mean, you have some doubt yourself, right?
I am not 100% positive that it was caused by a serrated knife.
And indeed, nowhere in your initial autopsy report do you even mention any kind of serrated knife, correct?
That's correct, and that is why, because I do not feel that I can say 100% it was caused by a serrated knife.
Right, and the only reason you're entertaining that, frankly, if you agree with me, is because you read that JPAC report, right?
No, that is not true. I thought that the day I looked at the jaw, however, I felt like there were other possible tools that could have caused that maybe I was unaware of. The day I looked at the jaw, I felt like that could have been caused by a serrated knife.
Okay, and then to go back to the questions that the state was asking you relative to, how boar injuries would present themselves, would you agree with me that based on at least some of the literature you've read, that the hallmark of a wild boar attack are penetrating wounds, potentially fatal, from the abdomen down?
Judge, objection. This has been asked and answered about penetrating wounds. It also goes beyond the scope.
It goes for investigation that you testified about.
The objection is overruled.
You agree with me that literature suggests that wild boar attacks have the penetrating injuries from the abdomen down, right?
The article that I was given today did specifically make that statement, and I would agree. That is sounds to be a scientifically sound statement.
And it makes sense because that would be the size of the boar and
Yes.
would be anticipated where the boar would attack into, right?
Yes, I think that's a logical conclusion.
But you testified regarding in terms of your testimony regarding the experiments on, I guess, with the goats and wild boar.
Honestly, I don't recall. It was a non-human mammal.
Okay, where was that article from?
I don't have it with me, so I can't give you the specifics.
Did you ever give that article to the prosecutors?
No, it was something that I looked up in my own research, which I do continually, and I don't routinely provide every book that I read and every article that I read.
Okay. I guess one final question, or final line of question, is that regarding these nail, or what you testified about the nails, and the question about them falling off when they're decomposing. If I heard you correctly when you first addressed it in your testimony, I think I heard you say that it takes a matter of weeks or months before that particular dropping of nails would happen?
No, I wouldn't say that. It depends. Decomposition occurs at highly variable rates depending upon the environment, whether the body's outdoors in a hot environment, a cold environment, in air conditioning. The rate of decomposition can vary wildly. So here in Hawaii, it's a very warm and humid environment. So here, decomposition can occur relatively quickly. And in autopsies that I've done, unrelated to this case, I have had bodies that were in that position where the skin was slipping off in a matter of 3 or 4 days.
Okay. No further questions, thank you.
Are there any juror questions?
Yes, Your Honor.
think given the number, what we'll do is let our jury go to lunch recess. Likewise for our witness, and we'll begin to consider these questions. We won't finish by the noon hour, but and then when we return, we'll present whatever questions will be presented to the witness at that time. So you can take your lunch hour at this time, ladies and gentlemen, and as well as. Thank you. Or the area in which the nail was found, Mr. Rivera.
Yeah, I don't think she knows. Speculation.
Lack of foundation.
All right, sustained. Next question. Can soil and or other surrounding environment accelerate decomposition or flesh becoming separated from the nail? Mr. Rivera.
No objection.
Mr. Uplow.
No objection.
All right, this question will be asked. Next question, were informed, that's the way it reads, were informed or advised of any wildlife footprints, feces, or other evidence of wildlife presence where evidence was discovered? Mr. Rivera.
No objection.
I would rely on this.
That's what she relies on in her analysis.
I'll allow the question. Next jury question form, first question. Would it be true that injuries from boar teeth or tusk would be closer to a tear-like fashion versus a clean cut from a sharp object? Mr. Rivera.
No objection.
Mr. Uplow.
Leaving a lack of foundation.
This question will be asked. Next question. Do wildlife teeth have perfectly serrated features as compared to a knife or saw? Mr. Rivera.
No objection.
Lack of foundation and relevance is to all wildlife.
Well, I'm going to sustain the objection. Wildlife teeth is a fairly broad term. So at any rate, I'll sustain the objection. Next question. I think it reads, is your profession, job responsibility, and tasks are of an examiner versus an investigator, yes or no? Mr. Rivera.
No objection.
Mr. Uplow.
No objection.
All right, this question will be asked. Next form question. In your opinion, were injuries, damage to evidence more consistent to a sharp object inflicted versus bruising or tear-type injuries which would be caused by wildlife pulling, tugging, and or chewing on evidence? Mr. Rivera.
No objection.
Mr. Uplow.
lack of foundation, and vague. I'll remind the court, your foundation is one article relative to that on goats.
I'll allow the question. Next jury question form. One question. How many days would you think it would take for human nails to start coming off, Mr. Rivera?
No objection.
Mr. Upwell?
No objection.
All right, this question will be asked. Next jury question form, one question. How quickly can skin slippage occur, Mr. Rivera?
No objection.
Mr. Upwell?
No objection.
This question will be asked. Next form, first question. How long after death would it take for skin slippage to detach fingernails from the fingertips? Mr. Rivera?
No objection.
Mr. Upwell?
Asked and answered, or asked.
I'll allow the question. It's a little bit different from the others. Next question. Is it likely the broad defects were caused by a right-handed human? Mr. Rivera?
In the cause for speculation.
Mr. Upwell? All right. Sustained. We'll do the rest of these after lunch. All right. We've got a number to go yet, so. All right, we'll take our lunch recess at this point.
Recess.